welcome to Caring for New Hampshire, a ministry of Concerned Women for America. I'm Elaine Driscoll, State Director, and we're so glad to have you with us today. I just wanted to let you know that we have a couple of things going on in our U.S. Congress that you should be aware of, and one of them is the CRC Rights of the Child bill. It's actually a treaty, and it is being pushed through our Congress at this point. It is coming up, and I know the White House administration is very much behind it. But for us here in the United States, it would actually work in the opposite of what it was intended for other countries, in that it would put a lot of burden on parents, take a lot of rights away from parents, and really interfere with our ability to decide what is best for our children. Each family is individual and unique and not cookie cutter, and this bill would pretty much make things cookie cutter and allow the federal government to literally come into your home and decide what's best for you, your children, and for your husband or your wife, as the case may be. So if you can take the time to call Senator Ayotte or Senator Shaheen and our two representatives, Congressman Bass and Congressman Genta, and just say to them, you know, this is not something that we want to have signed as a treaty that we're going to follow here in the United States. Ask them please not to support it. And I thank you so much for taking that time to do that. I know that, you know, we have so many things going on in our lives, but this is really important. And I would just really implore you to please take a few minutes and call them and just let them know that this is not something that you want to see the United States to be brought under. It's just not the right thing for us. And the second thing also has to do with the family, and this is by parentalrights.org. They have been pushing for an amendment that would define parental rights in our state constitution and would help alleviate some of the court cases that are coming up now and are etching away parental rights, especially in the area of education. And also, while you're talking to your senators and congressmen, ask them to please co-sponsor if they haven't already, or definitely to support the parental rights amendment. And I thank you so much right now for that few minutes that you take that can make such a big difference. And you know, our congressmen and senators are constantly looking for feedback from us. They really appreciate it. They tell me that all the time. They really appreciate it when we call them. We let them know what's on our minds and how we would like things done. And also, if we just give them a word of thanks for what they're doing. They don't often hear that. So please take the time. And if they're doing what you want them to do, say thank you. All right. Well, tonight we have a very, very interesting show. It's really going to be an educational show. It's been very educational for me. We're going to be talking about the Electoral College. And the reason that we're going to be talking about it is because there is a movement in our nation to circumvent the Electoral College and go to a popular vote. And so we have invited a very special guest. Her name is Diane Bitter, and she is from the Seacoast Freedom Network. And yes. You are the founder of that network?
The co-founder, yes.
Co-founder.
Of the Seacoast Freedom Network. But that sprang up very spontaneously after the very first Tea Party that we held in Portsmouth. And it just kind of grew from there. And my involvement grew from that point also, which is roughly 2.5 years ago, and that's about when I met you.
Yeah, that's right, that's right. And you really were in a place where a lot of people were, where you were keeping your eye on what was going on in the world of legislation and who was being elected and whatnot, but not necessarily active. But
that's right.
I would like you to share where you have come in the last 2 years and all the things that you are doing at this point.
Well, I would be happy to do that. It's one of those things that I wake up some mornings and say, how did all this evolve? Because it started with that Seacoast Freedom Network, co-founding it with Sue Polidoro, whom you know,
yes.
In the Seacoast area. And from there, we expanded to network with other Tea Party groups. And so we still have that group going, but I'm also the vice chair of the Granite State Patriots Liberty PAC, which is an umbrella group that brings Jerry DeLemos
yes.
is the chairman, and that brings all of the Tea Party groups together, and we do quite a few things with that. But in addition, I'm a conservative, so of course I wanted to foster those principles as well, and the Republican Party seems to be the one that does that primarily, at least that I can relate to. So I got involved there, and I'm now have been, this is my third year, the chair of the Rye Town Republican Committee. I'm the Area 1 chair of the Rockingham County Republican Committee, and I'm the program chair of the Seacoast Republican Women.
Oh, my
so
goodness.
These are a lot of hats, but a lot of the work is overlapping. So it's not as much as it sounds.
Well, thank you so much for just getting involved. And, I think that by you sharing like this, you can be a real encouragement to other women, but just the general population that, hey, being an ordinary citizen, you can still get involved and be involved as much as you possibly want to be.
You don't have to have any special requirements. You just have to have the interest, and any grandmother can do it. But I thank you for asking me to come here tonight, because this subject is very troublesome. What's going on?
Yes, it is troublesome. So let's get to the subject.
Right. Okay.
And what we're talking about is the Electoral College. So I know even for myself, I had to go back and do some studying
Research.
up. Okay, what's the Electoral College? How did it actually come about? And so we're going to talk a little bit about that right now, the history of the Electoral College, and that was actually formed in the 1800s, right?
Yes. Yeah. Exactly.
And
well, the original intent for the election process was far different from what it evolved to with the Electoral College. What our founders had in mind was something a bit different, but it didn't quite work the way they expected it to. For the first few elections, things got a little dicey, and so eventually they came up with the solution of the Electoral College, which, when you look back and you think this is over 200 years that this has been in the process, and
it's functioned very well.
It's functioned very well, thank you. There have only been 3 instances when the popular vote exceeded the electoral vote for any particular candidate. And given those odds over all those years and all those elections, I think that's a pretty good record.
It's very, very good. Now, the original, when you say it got dicey, the problem that they were coming up with was that some states were larger and more heavily populated than other states. And so that meant that the larger states would have the groundswell of votes and monopolize the voting process.
Exactly.
And that was a very real worry for the leaders of that time, and that was why they started looking at a more representative way for the states to be represented equally. Correct?
And what they came up with was ingenious, really, when you think about it. And I can't understand why this push now, why this need to change it, except that what I found, I did some research as you did. I came up with things I had no idea about before. Apparently, the legislation to overturn the Electoral College is the one piece of the most brought up piece of legislation over the years. Apparently, there have been did you come across this? 700 bills over the years to cancel the Electoral College and go to a popular vote. And every time it's been shot down. Now, of course, what's happening now is that those who are pushing this process, and I'm still trying to figure out who's behind this and where the money is coming from behind this. But their process now is to just go around the Constitution. Let's ignore the Constitution. We'll find another way to do it. And that's what's disturbing.
Yeah. Well, before we get into that, let's talk about how the Electoral College actually works, so people can understand the value of and the absolute insight that the founders had and why they developed this the way they did. So we're looking at, help me out because I might get some of this or a little bit wrong.
I'm sure you have it, Elaine. You go for it.
But each state is given 2 votes, correct?
Well, they have a minimum of
two votes.
In the basically the formula, if you think of it, the number of senators and the number of representatives you have will equal your number of electors.
Okay, except in our case.
So you have, every state is going to have at least 2 votes because they have 2 senators, and they're going to have at least 1 representative. So they're going to have a minimum of 3. But of course, the larger states, what were we talking about before? How many did you say California has?
55.
55. So you see how that skewers things, especially for us here in New Hampshire.
Right.
I mean, we're way down there in the single digits.
I know.
The little single digits.
I know. And now, how do we get these electors?
The electors themselves, the numbers come from the census. That's the start.
Okay.
So in the same way that our representatives are counted by the census, which is our population. So X number of people equals X number of electors.
Okay. And now, I know there was when they made some changes over the years to, it's in the 12th Amendment, right? Our election of our president and how he's elected. When they made some changes to it, it actually caused us to have a 2-party system. And so now what happens is those electors, as they're called, who represent the actual vote of the populace, are nominated through each party, correct?
That's correct, yes. And I think that this may vary from state to state, but don't hold me to that because I'm not 100% certain. I believe in some states the party chairs or the party executives in that state actually choose the electors. And of course, you want to describe how it happens here in New Hampshire? Yeah.
I'm not absolutely sure.
All right.
But
tell us what you think.
I think it's done through the party. I think that it's probably done through the party, and that.
But we actually do elect the people. The voters actually elect the electors.
Yes, they are put on the
on a
ballot.
Yes.
And then we vote. The general population votes on who will represent them and represent their vote.
Yeah.
And so after that happens, then these electors come together and they cast their vote, or the vote representative of the people. Those votes are, in essence, they're certified by the governor and the Secretary of State, and they're then sent to the U.S. Senate President, which in our case would be Senator Harry Reid. And then they open those, all of the ballots from all the states.
They're all sealed when they go to him.
Right.
And they're opened as a group.
Right. On January 6th.
Right. And that's when
the
officially counted.
Right.
Now, the other thing that I found interesting is that I was under the assumption that all of the states operated on a winner-take-all process. That, for instance, if in New Hampshire the majority of our votes go for candidate X, our electors then go to the meeting and vote for candidate X. However, Maine and Nebraska split their votes. And I don't know how that happened or why. And it's interesting that only those two do it. So we need to look into that.
Yeah,
a little more.
I don't know why they go that route. I kind of focused on New Hampshire and what was happening.
Yeah,
with
I
New
came upon that, and it was a little bit of a surprise. So
yeah, so that's how the whole process actually works. And again, the reason that our leadership from years ago went that route was to help keep from any political jargoning and infighting and whatnot, and bulking of the system of getting someone elected to office.
Yes.
This really has made it a very certifiable, and yes, this is, this person has been elected legally. And that's why we have used the Electoral College for all these years and not gone to a direct popular vote. But the direct popular vote does have an influence on the electors, wouldn't you say? They could vote
within each state, of course. I mean, our vote definitely counts. This is one of the arguments. Obviously, I think that we should stay with the Electoral College. I think it's a sound and proven system, and I think to abandon that would be foolish. But let's just play devil's advocate. Those who are saying we need to go with the popular vote are saying, well, your vote doesn't really count because the elector actually passes the vote. But it does count because your vote is what is determining the way your whole state is going to vote. So yes, you do have a voice, and yes, it does count.
Now, if we let's go to the popular vote method. If we go to the popular vote method, then what happens to us as a state?
Well, it's very clear what happens. The big states take over, and the rest of us might as well not even bother
to vote,
to do anything, because they'll carry it all.
Yes, because they have a higher population.
They will, and I think that, when we look back at the wisdom of our founders and the way they set up the separations of the various parts of our branches of government and the Constitution, it was beautifully done and so perfect in so many respects. Now, obviously, it's not 100%, but it's sure better than anything else that anyone else has come up with. So that is
another one of the reasons why they decided to go to a more state representative form of election was because they realized that states that had higher population versus states with lower population were not getting a voice into who was being elected. Exactly. And so that's exactly what we'd revert back to. We'd have California and Texas dictating pretty much who our president was and vice president every year.
And the urban areas too, because we are a very diverse society throughout this country, but we do have heavier concentrations of people in the urban areas, and those people tend to think alike and tend to share basic ideologies. And if those people were the ones deciding everything for us, the rest of the people in the rest of the country really wouldn't have much of a voice.
Exactly. The farmers out in the Midwest don't have the same needs as the people who live in New York City. So
we already see how, with our current administration, how this document, our Constitution, is being circumvented for so many things. And to me, this is just another way that it's being avoided.
Well, let's talk about this national popular vote. Can you bring us up to speed on what's going on with that?
Well, all I know is what I read and hear. I haven't actually been to any of their meetings, but it appears, at least if what they're saying is accurate, and who knows, you and I talked before the program that we don't really believe everything the polls tell us, because if a poll says, well, 80% of the population agrees with us about this. Well, let's back up. I want to see the question. What was the poll question? Because a question can be skewed in such a way that you get the desired answer.
Right.
Whoever's conducting the poll, so we don't know who conducted the poll and what the question was or who they questioned. So until we have more information, it's hard to really follow a poll. But if what they're saying is true, and I say if, it appears that they now have almost 50% of the states in agreement that we should have our presidential election by a popular vote. And their contention is that once they have the majority of the states in agreement, that it's a done deal. But that's not, I mean, if our Constitution says this is the way it's done, that requires a constitutional amendment to change it. And yet these people are saying, no, we don't have to do that. The states will, if we get 50% of the states to form this compact, then it's done. And that's the way it's going to be happening.
Now,
that's scary.
There's, how is New Hampshire involved in this particular popular vote? Are we involved?
We do have legislation. Well, not a bill, a resolution that's on the table that's going to be before our legislators.
Yes, we do have, there's two of them, I think, as a matter of fact.
I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, there are two.
They're coming up, and so it will be discussed. So it's going to be up to the voters to let their legislators know. Yes.
Once again, and that's why we do this show, because we want to try to help people to understand what's coming up and how they can be informed.
Yes.
And
it's a lot of work, Elaine. It really is. Some days I wake up and I say, could I just have a day off today when I don't have to call someone or write a letter or do, but there doesn't seem to be a break because all of this has been happening very quietly underground.
Yes, I had not heard very much about this until somebody sent me a link to it and said, you better check this out. And I was like, what?
I know.
I was very, very surprised at how far it's progressed already.
I know, because when I first heard about it, I thought, oh, well, that's not going to go anywhere. And then a week or two later, here it is. We find out it's already infiltrated. And I don't know what you have found, but when I talk with just, like, for instance, today, the painter at my house, and tell him this is happening, and he says, well, they can't do that. I said, well, I think they're doing it. But we've heard nothing in the media.
No,
so I thank you for bringing this out as an educational process. We need to alert people that this is going on.
Yes, and it's very important that people understand that our government is set up to be representative, and so that everyone has the opportunity to have their voice heard. And by going to a popular vote, it might sound like your voice is getting heard, but in essence, it will not be heard. Especially unless everybody wants to move to California or Texas.
And more importantly, every time we whittle away at our Constitution, more of our liberties and freedoms are taken from us.
That is
and
so true.
Each step just adds to that process.
And we open ourselves up to more corruption of our voting process. And seeing as how we elect a person who actually becomes leader of the free world, at least today, I would like to make sure that our voting process is as clean as it can be. I mean, nothing is ever perfect because we don't have perfect people, but it certainly has facilitated clean elections and, bloodless elections. Which can really, we've never experienced anything like that in our country, but there are other countries, even in modern history, that have certainly experienced that.
Exactly.
So this is a very important vehicle, and I'm so glad that you came and
thank you for having
me.
I'm delighted
shared
to be
with
here.
us on this, and I hope that our listeners will really take an opportunity to explore more about the Electoral College. We've tried to cover as much as we can to help you be informed on it, but so you can certainly go to the government website and get lots of information there about the Electoral College as well. And really, when this legislation starts to move through our legislature, I hope that you will take the time to call your local representative. It will be in the House, and just say, you know, I want to stay with the Electoral College. Popular vote is just not for New Hampshire. We like being first in the nation in our primary. And if we go to a popular vote, why do we even need a primary? So, you know, this is all about representing the little guy, which is something that we like to do a lot here in New Hampshire, and make sure that the big guy isn't the only one that's voice is heard. So, again, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much, Diane, for being here and
for having me,
helping us to understand this whole process. And thank you so much for all that you're doing here in New Hampshire.
Thank you.
And we really appreciate you. I know that it's a lot of work. So join us again next time, and we just pray that God be with you, and have a wonderful week, and we'll see you next time on Caring for New Hampshire.